with us, as is our habit on Thursdays. I've been doing a lot of broadcasting on Thursday. I seem to try to do them all on Thursday. Why not? Mike, how are you?
Just fine. And greetings from a rainy LA.
Right, right. Well, I mean, it's good for the earth, right?
That's right.
Too bad LA didn't, if they haven't figured out how to capture some of that water.
Well, they've tried.
They should have built infrastructure that didn't let it all just siphon off into the ocean and instead deal with the desert conditions and the drought. But of course, those are big, big infrastructure projects that this country no longer does. Haven't really done them, I don't think, since Eisenhower's highway system.
Well, I mean,
But
in defense, they did try a big project under the name of William Mulholland, who was portrayed under a different name in the movie Chinatown, and he was
uh-huh.
considered the man who made L.A. until a little whoopsie with a dam that burst and killed a lot of people late in his career. But
uh,
all kinds
I've
of
heard
juicy history in early LA. But anyway,
no, I've heard talk about, and this comes from the LaRouche type people, which are who are interesting. I'm not on board with them, but they're one of the things they're into is building the national infrastructure, creating. They're very nationalist in
yeah,
that way, and they've talked about the Great Slave Lake, which is in the northern part of Canada. It's near the Yukon in
right.
the northern territories that apparently dumps upwards of like 1 trillion gallons of water into the Arctic Sea almost weekly, and that it could be harnessed, it could be funneled, there could be a pipeline built from the Great Slave Lake into the western part of the United States where the water is needed. But there doesn't seem to be any will to do it. They've been talking about that for years. I think the John Birch Society used to talk about that too.
Yeah, well, the problem is no one wants to invoke slavery again. Maybe they can, maybe they can
uh,
rename the lake.
right. No. Anyhow, I'm looking at I just had on Mel K from the Mel K podcast. She's amazing. I mean, it was a great interview. I follow her podcast. She's just a New York Jewish girl who used to listen to her father play Rush Limbaugh when she was growing up. Didn't pay much attention to it, but a little of it seeped in.
Hmm.
And she became what she calls red pilled and went out to, she became a documentary filmmaker, her and her husband. And they made some pretty good films, including one about the JFK assassination. And then during the pandemic, she started a podcast that has just taken off. And it's really something. So she just came on with me. I'm hoping to go on her show, maybe to talk about my book sometime next week. And she's talking about she's doing some pretty cutting edge and bold talk about the false flag of January 6th and the stolen election. She's been taken off YouTube, but other than that, she's fine.
Well, that I just have to interrupt. There's a number of people that have either been taken off or voluntarily left YouTube
Right.
to create pretty large followings on Rumble,
Yeah.
including Dan Bongino, but he's not the only one.
Oh no. I mean, she's and I agree with her. She's I don't want to go back on YouTube. Why worry about it? The hell with them. It's like why do we have to like sit on spielkes, as they say in Yiddish, and worry about every little word? I'm not even bothering right now either with TikTok because the last time I had you on, they canceled my station again.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's gone. I don't know.
What did you, do you know what you did wrong?
I think that the hot button for them is any criticism of the vaccine. That's their thing. I
Still,
mean,
still. I
oh
mean,
yeah, I
that's
mean,
ludicrous
well,
at
I
this
mean
point.
this no, no, no. This is still, I mean, the vaccine is still rolling out. I mean, aren't they doing like a new one that they want to incorporate it into all vaccines for children now? The mRNA technology, which of course with the spike protein that possibly may alter your entire DNA system for the rest of your life.
I
They don't
think,
know.
well, okay, what happened was when the last booster came out, I think fewer than 2% of the people got it.
Right.
So still, they are very much enamored with this mRNA technology, which clearly has some problems. And one of the originators of it, who was Robert Malone, has been very outspoken in how it wasn't ready for prime time. So
Yeah. And now they
I
want to inject it into meat. They're going to inject cows,
yeah,
and they even are developing an aerosol where you can just spray it in your nose. I mean, it's just it's going to be everywhere. They're probably going to stop spraying, they're going to spray cabbages with it. I don't know. It's just right. It's gonna They're going to get it into our system, come hook or crook. So I think that that's what led to TikTok canceling my station. I can still go on TikTok with my oldest, with my, the station I was having, and that's actually picked up a little bit.
hmm.
But I'm being very careful. I don't want to completely blow it with them. Nevertheless, I'm doing like Mel K is doing. I mean, I'm building my show on all of these alternative networks. Rockfin is doing well. I've got these other ones. It's that's what we all are doing. And I don't think that when the deep state, as President Trump accurately calls them, when after their false flag of January 6th, they thought that they could take everybody down. But all these alternative markets sprang up, and they haven't been able to do it. So
Well, the argument supposedly for the big YouTube creators is that the compensation scheme is better. But then
mhm.
you have this sort of silly situation where Mark Dice, who's got well
Yes,
over a
hmm
billion subscribers, at least three times in each broadcast he does, he sort of stops and says, "Well, we can't say that, and we can't say this." Um, and I get it. I mean, he may be purposely doing that, but still, I think it took a lot of stones for Bongino to just leave YouTube. Now he's up at about, I believe, 3 million subs, one of the top Rumble guys. And more people ought to just leave the mothership because otherwise it's stupid. Because, the whole problem with YouTube is that the big creators are not doing really next level stuff. Uh,
No, I mean they basically have been reduced to just a lot of entertainment, and some of it's
yeah,
good. I'm not criticizing that, but if any in terms of any talk, you can be David Pakman and you're fine. But and even he got a strike.
yeah.
So you just have to who knows who's running it. I think that they really thought they had the whole thing hermetically sealed, and when they took Trump off of Twitter, but it hasn't worked out that way. And even though I'm critical, Elon Musk has done a fairly good job. He's still doing some censorship. He put Jaccarino in there to run Twitter. And I noticed that right after he purchased Twitter, I got a huge surge of followers, but then it tapered off. So I think that they're still doing the censorship, but not as badly. At least there's some freedom there. But
Well,
but
here's a question for you in the audience. Would it be a better idea to just have a freewheeling platform, no censorship, no content moderation, and let the chips fall where they may? And if there's a channel that irritates you, just don't watch it.
I think so. I mean, I would say that I'd use the old nostrum that was created by Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, which is that freedom of speech does not include yelling fire in a crowded theater. You cannot openly call for violence against any person or group. You know, obviously. So yeah, there has to be some community standards. Even if they went with the community standards of the FCC, it would be better. I mean, the FCC allows Jeff Cooner here in Boston at WRKO. He talks about the stolen election. He talks about the false flag. He talks about all the things that are forbidden on YouTube, but he is able to do it because that's free speech. I mean, the FCC, he's got that protection. He's not in violation of them. Now they're trying to get rid of him. He's got enemies, the same people, but it's not like the station's going to drop him. He might be dropped if the sponsors drop him.
Right.
But so far he's fine, and there were many others like that, and that's old-fashioned radio. So if the internet wanted to do that, that would probably work. It'd certainly be better what they're doing now.
Well, here's the thing to consider. There are all kinds of extremely offensive websites that are readily available. So
Yes,
I don't really see this whole notion of what makes video platforms any more important for content moderation, and inevitably the people in favor of censorship always have a fascist mindset.
oh yeah, they do, and they use the excuse of saying that, well, we can't put advertising on this site or that site. There's a way around that. That's not complicated. I mean, that's a matter of basically maybe putting sites in different categories, and then when somebody buys a commercial, they can choose which categories they want to be on. I mean, it's not like, that's not brain science.
Well,
That's like
it's interesting you mentioned that, because when it first started, the algorithm on that was terrible, because when Debbie Schlussel was active on her website, there was all kinds of anti-Israel ads that would appear.
right.
So, I mean, they've improved it obviously since then, but it was the original algorithm must have been terrible, because that became sort of an internet joke, that inevitably you saw the other point of view, and to which I suggested maybe that was on purpose. Maybe
To
people
make
watch,
a case, yeah.
yeah. So
And if you
whatever.
want to run anti-Israel websites, that's your right. I don't have a
Yeah.
problem with it, but I think that maybe you don't necessarily want your advertising to appear there. Fine,
Yeah.
put them in a category. Call it the Jew hater category. I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever, and let them have at it. But people can then buy commercials like you buy commercials in a newspaper or any other venue. I mean, I've sold ads for radio stations, and I've had sponsors say, well, we want to be at this time and not that time. Why would this be any different? I mean, it's sort of
I think that they really, in the early history of Google and YouTube, they didn't really care very much. They didn't put forth the talent. I mean, up until quite recently, YouTube was run by one of the Google founders' sister-in-law. All right.
what's her name? Yeah, Pilecki.
Susan, what's her name?
Yeah, I forget, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's very incestuous. They're all
Yeah.
married to each other, and it's all this big family. And who is this, Sergey Brin or someone? I don't know. These people are the new super rich, the new super elite. They're all on the left, and they just operate in that kind of a bubble. But I want to talk about the election coming up. Trump is ahead in all the polls, including the battleground states. He obviously has the Republican nomination. He's something like 30 points ahead of Nikki. And Biden is like flailing away, and he's not doing well. Americans are waking up to this horrendous regime, including a lot of people on the liberal side in the big cities. They can see that illegal aliens are now encamping out in Boston at Logan Airport. They're taking over a rec center in Roxbury, which means that black kids can't go there now.
So where does this end? Okay, because you're a Boston guy. There's not an infinite amount of space at Logan Airport or at all these public facilities. So what's the big play? All right, once they fill this up, then what do they do? start pitching
Well, I
tent.
mean, in Boston, I mean, the governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, has suggested that people take them into their homes. I don't think so. That's not going to happen. And I think that the mayor of Chicago said the same thing. So it's becoming unpalatable politically for them because you've got people, especially minorities, turning on the Democratic Party. You've got, there's all sorts of developments under Biden that are really upsetting people. The world feels like there's just something that feels different. The world feels like it's on the verge of a nuclear war. We just we get the sense that something bad is coming down the pike because it probably is. There's just instability around the world as a result of this administration. I mean, they released I don't know how many billions of dollars to Iran, and Iran has used the money clearly to attack American bases in Syria and Iraq, to attack to help their proxies, the Houthis, attack shipping, which is going to affect world trade, and it's going to affect the supply chain, only pushing up inflation more. And they gave it to Hezbollah so they can attack Israel. So these things and the just the invasion of Ukraine is connected to the administration. They could have made a peace with Russia, but they were pressured not to by Victoria Nuland and other people who want to have a color revolution in Moscow, basically. And just in general, there's this lack of stability. Now you've got the farmers rebelling all across Europe against the EU and their agenda to end agriculture or reduce it. You've got the election of conservative and nationalist populist governments in Europe, including Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, which is almost unthinkable, maybe a few years ago, that he would have been elected, and of course Milei in Argentina, and the guy in El Salvador who put thousands of gang members in prison, and in Taiwan, you have a pro-Taiwan nationalist who is standing up to China. So, there's a movement around the world that's rejecting the globalist world order illuminist agenda, and I think that it's starting to give buoyancy to another Trump term.
Well, I would
So,
agree, but at the same time, where's our own government right now uh, making the very statements that you're saying? I mean, how hard is it to realize that virtually everybody in the government is massively corrupt? They don't have your best interest at heart. Um, how is that difficult? I mean, is it so important to have a political career that you just can't rock the boat no matter what? I mean, what
well, I
is
mean
the
that seems to be the case in this government, and they're coming out with just these incredible lies that nobody is believing. I mean, Bidenomics, the economy, we're doing so much better. It costs $15 to get a hamburger at McDonald's. The economy is not doing so much better. And also, I mean, we're standing up to against illegal immigration. I mean, nobody's believing anything that they're saying. It's just not flying. So what do? They send out Kamala Harris. I mean,
yeah?
that creates great confidence, right? I mean,
Well,
she
so
kind
they're hoping that they have enough idiot partisans that'll support them in any way. I mean, and there may be some number of those. If you go on Twitter, it's astounding. I mean, assuming that these are not bots that are posting this stuff, it doesn't matter. You can be talking about the weather, and there will be people saying, "Well, it's Trump's fault."
Oh, I
Uh,
know. I see that on Twitter, and I'm not. It's discouraging, but you have to realize that that has to do with the people that you and I subscribe to on Twitter. I mean,
yeah,
but so that. But yes, I've seen that, and of course, what is their big weapon? I mean, what is their big? psyop, if you will, Taylor Swift. And her
Well,
followers are saying, well, if if
Taylor
Trump is
Swift.
reelected, we're going to leave the country. And
Well,
they're registering illegal aliens to vote. Something like 30% now of young people consider themselves to be non-binary. I mean, those are obviously Biden people. I mean, when did that happen? I mean, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have heard of this.
I think it was. It all started with the. Well, how far do you want to go back? But
Right.
you know, as we've said so many times, once you got prayer out of schools, and you had the sexual revolution,
Right.
which, if people only knew, was started by the homosexuals. If
Right.
people only knew that, okay.
No,
So
you're
then
right.
it morphed into something, and gradually became this transgender thing, which has captured far too much of academic medicine. It
Yeah,
didn't
not to
surprise.
mention castrating children and hysterectomies. This would have been unthinkable. Look, I know somebody in my own community that's a doctor who's involved in this,
Oh yeah.
and and very self-righteous about it too. Oh, I mean, this is like, the future and this is great. Can you imagine? I mean, we're talking children here. It's like the most evil, the most despicable thing to do to a child. I mean,
Well,
I
part of
mean,
it was
normally they would be in prison for life, even 5 years ago. He would have
part
been
of it
sent.
was energized by the fact that it became a political movement. All right. The only people against mutilation surgery are these mouth breathing conservatives, you see.
Mm,
So if you actually see what's going on in med school now, it's very disheartening. There's an extreme liberal, uh, at the least, point of view. Academic medicine, if people, it just blows my mind. Uh, the reason like a Tony Fauci can exist is that there was, going back to the beginning of allopathic medicine, tended to be driven by academics, because back in the day you were an adjunct professor, but you actually did clinical medicine. Now you have people like Fauci, for example, and the Harvard Med School types and so on and so forth, that really don't get involved with patients. They're above that. So it's very easy to come up with this sort of theoretical idea that, gee, the cure for gender dysphoria is to do mutilation surgery. Now, of
oh
course,
my
the other
God.
problem is people buy into it, and overwhelmingly, unfortunately, so I've looked into this in some detail. Inevitably, it seems that these are a product of broken homes, where the usually woman in the broken marriage is pushing this to get back at her ex. Every case I ever.
How awful. I mean, you using the child. I mean, I know of a case like this that went way back, and it was just what you're saying. The ex-wife was trying to get back at the former husband by mutilating the son, and it was
Yeah,
horrible. Now it's becoming more commonplace, and you've got I mean, Munchausen by proxy is part of it. I mean, this weird, psychological breakdown amongst women. Now, I know that if I said this on TikTok, I'd be gone. I
oh yeah,
mean, this is taboo.
yeah,
I
the
wouldn't
black
even, I would, this, you don't say this. But yeah, I mean, and you see, I mean, I'll also add that many of them have had abortions, all right?
yeah.
But leave it at that. I mean, it's a radicalized group that is angry and that is just not dealing with a full deck. I'm sorry to say it that way, but to do
Well,
this kind of thing,
you're right, and of course, this influences other things.
yeah,
The powers that be would like you to believe now that women are for Biden, and men are for Trump.
right,
But
right, which is not true.
I think it is a little more complicated than that.
And I don't think it's
Because
true. I mean, this is the classic dividing people up into these categories and then promoting that. I mean, Biden, they're going out with signs behind them saying "Stop Roe." I don't think so. First of all, they can't stop Roe. We have a constitution. The Supreme Court, what, they're going to bring a case again to try to re-implement another abortion law. I mean, that's history. Now, if they want to go to the states and try to change abortion laws, that's one thing, but it's not a national issue anymore. It's not. It's a state issue. It's just the way it is. But they're
But
gonna that's
it's
been their
very
calling card.
effective at getting, I believe, a minority of women ginned up. All right. Because if you look at it logically, you can still get an abortion in most states.
Right.
But more than that, how many abortions are you going to get?
Well, look, they're gonna find a case that it's gonna be like the George Floyd situation. I mean, that there's this one in Ohio where a woman was denied or she was charged with a crime because she had a miscarriage. Now, I think that it had to do with a misunderstanding. But this is I'm hearing about this. I mean, look at
Yeah.
what's happening here. This is women can't go to that state now. What happens if you have a daughter that's going to college there and she needs an abortion? I mean, it's a very emotional issue. But and maybe the states look. First of all, they're avoiding the fact that all the states basically do permit abortion in the case of a life of the mother.
Right.
That may need to be fine tuned a little bit to make sure that if a woman is at risk, she can get an abortion because that's I'm expressing my own sensibility here. I don't know, but there is perhaps some issues of that, but for the most part, the laws that are in place, like the heartbeat law, and that we found out about this at the time, those are the laws of most nations, including liberal nations like the Netherlands, right? They don't they don't permit abortion after a certain date
Well,
unless there's a
that's right. And
unless there's a
remember
damn good reason for it.
that you shouldn't necessarily believe everything you hear. I mean,
Right,
before Roe came in, there was this constant refrain of X thousand number of deaths by these so-called back alley abortions.
right. Then they
Well,
they had the symbol of the coat hanger and all
yeah,
of that. Yeah, I
it
remember.
turns out that the actual number was something like 37 nationally. So
Right,
you reach the point where there's so much mendacity and there's so much, I guess, what's the word they use now, astroturfing, that uh, number one, how can you really believe the polls on any of these issues? Because as I ask people, and they don't often answer, okay, if you got a phone call, would you respond to a poll? All right. It takes a certain
yeah,
individual to even want to respond to a poll, right? So
right.
immediately you have some sort of bias of what you're going after. So imagine this now, if we're calling women and we're going to talk about abortion, most women probably don't want to talk about it. So you're going to cone it down to a hardcore few, which brings us to this Taylor Swift thing.
Right,
That it's very depressing to me
it is.
that a 34-year-old clock ticking female who's been alleged, and most people believe, goes both ways,
Right.
um,
Well,
created
I
her
mean,
career.
the whole idea that Americans would vote because some pop star says, I mean, this is like, I mean, I was listening to Matt Walsh talk about this, and he was like, this is, I know it may not sound popular, but the founding fathers did not expect this as an issue that would come up in terms of who were people going to vote for. They expected an educated electorate who actually understood the responsibility of voting. And
But
that
don't
now,
forget, but don't forget, you had to be a property owner to vote. So
well,
once
that,
you own
that,
universal
that
suffrage,
well, that's his point. I mean, maybe
yeah,
voting should be something that you have to take a little test or something first. So there should be some qualification. So you don't, it just, the idea of just having any schmo walk off the street and vote, look what we end up with. We end up with Taylor Swift deciding who's going to be the president. I mean, it's completely lacking in any kind of content, and it could work. And I know like people like Charlie Kirk are saying that this is some kind of a psyop, and that you have to maybe ask yourself whether or not he's right. This is like she's going out and she's going to do voter drives. Nobody knows what the hell she's about, and doesn't matter what if we did know. It's not like she's not exactly in Mensa. I mean, this is like it's not like she's can articulate anything. I mean, the fact I think that Matt Walsh was saying that, for example, this other one, the Thunberg, Greta Thunberg, she got caught. She's reading off a page that was handed to her by somebody who's
Yeah.
ever managing this. This is like another. They bring out some young girl, and they basically it is a psyop. It's like this is going to tell the whole world what they should do in terms of public transportation. It's it's how they're operating, and maybe it has to do with this conditioning that we've all had going on. I don't know. It's
Well, I
you
mean,
know
there's always been celebrity influencers,
sure.
um, and generally their reputation was far different from reality. Um,
I mean, look at that's what they criticized Reagan for. They said, "Oh, he's an actor. He's like a lightweight." When in fact he actually did develop at least a coherent philosophy. He did a
yeah,
tour as a spokesman for GE, and he gave speeches, and then he became governor for 2 terms. It wasn't like he was, just an actor coming up, but he was constantly criticized by the left for that. Oh, he's a lightweight, and they remember Jerry Trudeau, the cartoonist, with Reagan's brain. This is he's stupid, but now here you have Taylor Swift. All of a sudden, oh, we love her.
yeah. Well, the other thing is, it seems to be tied into the NFL. It is unprecedented for the NFL to glom on
Right.
to some celebrity to this extent. I think it's backfiring because people, would rather watch what's going on in the field than to have every 5 minutes some view of Taylor Swift, how
Mm.
she's reacting to the game. Moreover, and I think that the NFL really stepped in it. People now started thinking about what they're watching, and there are all kinds of postings on many different forums about NFL games being rigged, which is not
Well,
that difficult to understand when you looked at the game between Detroit and San Francisco, where Detroit in the first half, Detroit is beating the crap out of San Francisco, and then they stop playing in the second half. What is that all about? So people are questioning.
are you saying that there was like money exchanging hands or I mean, or is it like a situation like the New England Patriots with Deflategate and Bob Kraft having people taking films of the opposition so they could?
I think it's more the narrative that has to be portrayed rather than necessarily a gambling interest. I mean, if you look into Super Bowl III, which is the one that the AFL won with Joe Namath, there were many aspects of that game that were very shady.
Mm-hmm.
Earl Morrall suddenly forgot how to throw passes. I mean, but the stakes there were that they had to give some credibility to this new league because the merger was of interest, and people have suggested that the owner at the time of the Colts, Carol Rosenblum, was a known heavy gambler. So the point is that it's not pure as the driven snow. There are some people.
There's a lot of money. There's a lot of money involved, and when there's that kind of money, there's going to be some, there's a temptation toward corruption. It's that simple. And
Yeah, well,
there's a lot on the line.
That they brought in this Taylor Swift thing to bring in women to watch football
Okay.
because men are leaving. I know in my case, I used to watch all the games. For a while, I was betting on the games that got into all that,
Right.
and then I started backing off. So Whitlock says that this whole kinder, gentler football, where you can't touch the quarterback, et cetera, uh, seems to be geared toward bringing in more women to watch it.
Right.
And
That's true.
that's part of the Taylor Swift thing. And to whatever extent they think that she might influence the election, well, it's always been there. There are people that listen to these celebrity endorsements for whatever reason. It's
Yeah,
been
but
there.
do they actually vote on somebody? Oh, so and so told me to vote. I mean, I mean, I suppose I remember. I mean, a woman that I know, an aunt, told me that she voted for the first time for John F. Kennedy because he was handsome, right? I'm like, well, did you know anything about him? What is it? Just you want to, if you want handsome, why not vote for, I don't know. I mean, what is that about? It's like, so
Yeah,
maybe there's, there's part of that. I mean, look, maybe in a sense, a politician has to have some charisma, but, you know, what about whatever, it's like they're not even wondering about who they are and what they're gonna do. And we're talking here about young women.
I think some of that is that when I was a kid, you didn't have this 24/7 election thing all the time. Election coverage started occurring maybe when the primaries were in play. But this idea that on January 21st, you start covering the next election, this is a relatively new phenomenon.
Although it's probably going to go back to the older approach just by the fact that the primaries are over. I mean, Biden is not running; he's unopposed. He got rid of JFK, RFK, I mean, and Trump is pretty much has cleaned the field as well. So I don't know how they're going to keep up the energy to cover this. What do you
That's a good
think is
point.
uh, with Trump so far ahead in the polls? I mean, do you have any thoughts about what they might try to pull off in terms of stopping him?
I think they've reached a crossroads now because this lawfare doesn't seem to be cutting it.
No,
Uh,
it's ridiculous. I mean, this last one,
Mostly, I think, well, there's two things. Obviously, these are trumped up charges, no pun intended. But the other problem
yeah,
is, which they didn't consider, is the allies that they have to obtain to do this stuff are so corrupt in themselves that it tends to fall apart of its own volition. Fannie Willis is not
oh
necessarily
yeah,
an exception. There's
no,
all kinds of stuff coming out about her, including a revelation, I believe, from yesterday that she was involved in firing employees that were trying to blow the whistle on the corruption in the DA's office before this Nathan Wade business. So if
right,
you're going to pull something like this, you're not going to get a choir boy to do it for you. So they go to New
no,
York. There's the Engoron judge. They
oh
get Lewis
horrible,
Kaplan. These people are corrupt as hell. And the problem is that it's going to break down. So what are they going to do? I suppose they're going to pull some woman out of the hat that Trump assaulted. They're going to find some data that he was on Epstein's island.
Something. I think that by now if he was, they would have found it because I'm sure they've gone through every little,
Oh yeah,
and they haven't really found it. So that doesn't stop them from saying it anyways. I mean, even recently with artificial intelligence, I don't know if you saw this business of him. He showed up at one of the dates with this crazy woman, and he held his hand up, and there was like some blemish on his hand, which gave James Carville the chance to go out and say, "Oh, he's got syphilis." Turns out that it was a fake. There was nothing on his
oh yeah.
hand. that was computer generated. They put, I mean, this is what they're doing now. They did, they treated the image, and
The
I think
first
that,
time the first time
yeah.
they did that to a big public figure was 2 or 3 years ago with Joe Rogan, where they doctored the video to make him look pale as hell. And it was exposed immediately. The real video had him look, hale and hearty. The other one had him look, like the pale shade of green.
Yeah.
And all CNN could say was, "Well, we didn't do it on purpose, the lighting conditions and so," but it was BS.
Well,
So
that's always gone on.
people are getting more used to deep fakes. Speaking of deep fakes, there was this thing from earlier this week, end of last week, about these supposedly horrific images of Taylor Swift being gang raped and so on,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
which were deep fakes. I believe she posted because who's going to do that?
So she just did it for publicity. I mean, what?
Okay, I mean, think about it. All right, if you're doing this to get clicks, it's going to be exposed within hours.
Right.
So, what's the long-term thing there? However, it gets her name out there. Oh, poor baby, this is happening to you. She
Yeah,
gets
but
to
what
the
is she?
point.
Why should she care though? I mean, she's the top. She's been the number one recording artist in the country for years. She owns Jackie Onassis's former house on Martha's Vineyard. So
Yeah,
she's super rich. Why should she care about? Why
you
would she?
say that, but I mean, I would think that if I were a big celebrity and I wanted to go to a football game, I wouldn't want my face being shown every 5 minutes either.
Right, I guess. I mean, she still is a public. She likes to a degree, but I mean that I don't know. I mean,
I don't know. I
but
think there's someone pulling the strings.
but that kind of thing has always gone on. Now it's just easier. I mean, look, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember back when I was a kid. I mean, we had in Quincy, Massachusetts, Francis X. Bellotti. He was running for governor. He was the attorney general at the time. His daughter happened to be a classmate of mine. He was a resident of Quincy. I knew him,
Yeah.
and his opponent, Elliot Richardson, who would go on to become attorney general under Nixon, he ran pictures of Bellotti in a hotel standing next to a mafia figure, taking advantage of his Italian background.
Yeah.
And it was completely fake. It was a completely doctored thing. I remember at the time it was a scandal, but it destroyed Bellotti's election. So
How
I'm
much?
just saying that
How much? How much backlash did Richardson ever get?
he wasn't elected either. But but the point is he tried to knock Bellotti out in the primary, and he did. But then he ended up losing the general. But nevertheless, it's the kind of dirty politics that's been played since day
Yeah.
one. I mean, Grover Cleveland, right? I mean, we can look at, what is it, something about having an illegitimate child. And I mean, that's just politics. So, but the problem now is
Nothing
that
to yeah.
it travels around the world in 2 seconds because of the
Yeah.
internet. And, you can actually, it's easier. I mean, you can create these images. But I think you're quite right that there's going to be some kind of a false flag with a woman. I mean, that seems to be what happens. This Carol, I mean, that did not work well. She was just so weird, and it was so obviously false. She wouldn't even mention the year that it happened. She goes out on the cover of a liberal magazine wearing the outfit that she claimed she wore when she'd been attacked by Trump. Turns out that the outfit wasn't on the market for, until a year or two later. So then she changed the date and said, I don't remember when this happened. And that the idea that it could have happened at Bergdorf Goodman to a Trump, who was the most famous man in New York at the time, is ridiculous. I mean, it's just absurd. The whole thing is obviously false. Now it turns out that she wrote a sex column in a newspaper where she talked about fantasizing about rape, and she accused other famous and high-profile men, including Les Moonves from CBS.
Right.
So, it's just so the fact that a jury would charge Trump $80 million simply for criticizing her, for criticizing someone that's making an accusation like that. I think that most people are disgusted by it, including liberals. It's another one of these teaching moments. It's like a Wellstone moment,
I
right?
think, I think a well-known moment in this was she was on, Gene Carroll was on Rachel Maddow's show the day
Yeah,
after of the big award. So, I hate both of them, but here's the point. So Rachel asked Carroll, all right, so you got all this money. What are you going to do to promote women's rights, whatever the hell it is, right? So her answer was, well, you know what? First thing I'm going to do, you and I are going to go shopping, and we're going to spend all this money on getting you a new wardrobe.
yeah.
And
And
the
they're
only
giggling. I mean, can you imagine how disgusting? And I mean, was she actually attacked 30 years ago that she would have any kind of like gravitas and respect? I mean, when somebody wins money, I mean, they don't go out and brag about it like that. It's so vulgar and so, distasteful that I think
well,
that
the
most,
fact that the scenario was based on a Law and Order Special Victims Unit episode. I mean, it
oh,
was a
yeah.
joke.
Right.
So they were able to get a jury of people in New York that hate Trump, uh, and it
And
doesn't.
they're that bad. I mean, it's really shaken my faith in the jury system. That
Oh,
and the DC
join
juries.
the club.
My first kind of like shock with juries was the OJ case, and we don't go into that, but it's like, oh, we don't care if whether he's guilty or not. We just want to have, black power. We're going to let the fellow black man off. It's like, and I'm like, wait a minute, and now it's become, like just so. I don't know. I mean, I did jury duty last summer, and I saw hints of it amongst jurors, and I think that there's a reason why they didn't let me become part of the deliberation. I mean, they could see that I was not, I was,
Well, that's it.
somewhat,
You know that if you're called for jury duty and you have brain one, you're going to be the foreman.
yeah,
But no, I have no faith in that system. The criminal justice system uh, has been completely compromised probably ever since the so-called war on drugs came in. And
yeah,
one of my many criticisms of Saint Ronnie is that he completely perverted Nixon's intention on what the war on drugs was supposed to be, because at least 1/3 of the money was supposed to be spent on rehab and education, but instead it turned into a tool of enforcement for the criminal justice mafia. It's very sad how that all worked out,
hmm
and the whole thing that's happening in that system is pathetic, and it's spilled over, of course, into the civil system. I mean, if she really had a rape complaint, it would have been better handled in the criminal justice system. But since it never occurred, she can go into there and, with the help of
but
a
look,
big backer.
it doesn't matter. They're able to do this. Look what they did. They tried to do to Brett Kavanaugh. Now,
Yeah.
regardless of what we might think of him, he was a legitimate and important nominee for the Supreme Court, and then they're calling him a gang rapist in front of his family on national television. And you could see his wife and his parents and his two young daughters were there behind him weeping. And then he gets emotional, and then they say, he doesn't have good judicial temperament. He's upset. That's not what I mean. It
Well, I
was
mean, in fairness, he was pretty foolish to bring his family there,
probably. I mean, very naive in a
because
way.
he should have known it was going to be blood sport.
I don't think anybody could have anticipated that it would get that ugly. And they're like asking him about, his high school yearbook and whether he drank beer. And it was just, it got to be just the most despicable thing. I mean, look, they did it. I suppose it goes back to Clarence Thomas.
Yeah.
So this is what they do. I mean, with Clarence Thomas, he never, there was never a claim that he had in any way touched her. He might have told a few off-color jokes. And this is a Supreme Court nomination conversation. I mean, really, it's like this is what they do. And I
Well,
just don't.
you bring that up, and that was another case of Reagan sitting on his hands. So I don't even want to go there, but you mentioned it. So it's been a dirty type of affair with this. But the Republicans, in the meantime, have this sort of lace curtain attitude. Why did they almost unanimously approve these unqualified women from
terrible for the federal bench? And I mean, I've been watching. I know that it wasn't effective, but some of the testimony, particularly John Kennedy from Louisiana, he's hilarious. I don't know if you caught him.
Yeah.
He is just, he's a brilliant guy. I mean, he's an Ivy League scholar. He's a lawyer, but he puts on this kind of like folksy. I think it's an affectation, but it's funny as hell. Well, you see, down in our neighborhood, but he like, and he eviscerates them by asking a couple of simple questions about what, stuff that any, first year college law student would know, and they don't know. And then he's bringing up aspects of their record, and yet and he's showing that they're really not, the right person, but yet they get confirmed.
So again, that's one reason that I could never be in that sort of environment.
Yeah.
I mean, you're making a point here. John Kennedy can make these points, but yet why be part of an institution that is operating this way?
It's discouraging.
What's the point of being the one guy on the Chicago White Sox that didn't cheat in the 1919 World Series?
It's very corrupt. And then you have you have Adam Schiff. He's on with Bill Maher. I watch every episode of Bill Maher. He should have been drummed out of Congress. They got rid of George Santos for telling stupid lies about his resume. I mean, who cares? That didn't affect anything. Whereas you got a guy like Schiff, he traveled around for 3 years getting his big fat face on television talking about that he had in his hip pocket evidence that Putin colluded with Trump to steal the 2016 election. And he never produced it. Never. I mean, he was censured. Why wasn't he removed? This is like outright.
Because it's a club, because they don't really do anything substantive. It's a debating society.
Yeah.
And the point I always make, which people don't like hearing, all right, I don't care if you're one of the 5%, the Jim Jordan, the John Kennedy, whatever. You're not going to change anything. It's massively corrupt, and it always will be until they have term limits, which they never will have. So what's the point?
Right. Well, at least they were able to like raise awareness. No, they're not going to change anything, but and sometimes, I mean, I've told this to people who are thinking of running for office. I ran for office. Yeah. You're not going to win, but at least you're going to get interviewed and you can knock a couple of issues into the culture. You can raise awareness about one or two issues that will leave an impression and will make people think. And in the long run, it could create change. So at least they are bringing these things up. It is worth it. I mean, a guy like Josh Hawley also is very good, and Ted Cruz is very good. They do bring up real issues. They're not going to get anything done, but at least we get to, it creates thinking among average people. So, it's not totally.
It certainly did, because when they were questioning this Ketanji Jackson Brown,
yeah,
the thing that just stuck in my mind, like, man, besides the one everybody remembers, she can't define a woman, the case of U.S. versus Virginia, that she
Which
claimed to never
she
heard
didn't
of,
even know. Yeah.
was, how did that pass? That was,
Yeah.
as we
Not to
mentioned,
mention that she was soft on child porn.
yeah,
But and now I think there might be another one because Sotomayor is saying that she's tired. She's working too hard. They've reduced the summer vacation by a week or two, and she's stressed over the right wing, the right leaning court, and it's too hard and too traumatic
good,
for
then
her.
quit.
Well, I think she's going to quit, and there's going to be another Katanji. I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, but I can't see that helping Biden.
No, they've let these institutions deteriorate, and
I
it's
mean, they've already done the black woman. I mean, it's like they've gone to that well already. I mean, what are they? Maybe they'll put on Kamala. I don't know. They want to
well,
get
maybe
rid
they'll
of.
get a transgender.
Yeah. Okay. That's right. They haven't had that yet. That'll be novel. Everything is so novel. This is
Yeah,
the first time, we've had this or
right.
that. It's like it means something. I mean, anyways. But as we tick down the days and the weeks toward the election, I do have a feeling of foreboding. I mean, you look at people like, these, the same. I mean, Mel K brought this up in that you've got what's his name? These two, Eisen and Weissman. These guys were the architects behind the Trump Russia hoax.
Yeah,
They were the architects behind the perfect phone call impeachment. They were probably the architects behind, well, they were the architects, according to Molly Ball of Time Magazine, behind the election steal and probably behind the false flag of January 6th. They're now running the show now. They're still there. They're figuring out how to stop. They tried to get him taken off the ballot, and these are very smart guys, and they're very tough. They don't mess around. I mean, they've got a lot of money behind them. They've got not just that corrupt billionaire from Hungary, but they've got Reid Hoffman, apparently, founder of LinkedIn, hates Trump so much he financed that crazy woman. What's her name? I mean, Carol. She lied
does
about it.
anyone know why he hates Trump that much?
I know. I mean, he's maybe it's just he's a one of these messianic lefties. Thinks he's going to change the world, and there's these
You know
other
what I
guys.
think it might be?
What do you
Revenge of
think?
the Nerds. I'm serious.
What is that?
Revenge of the Nerds,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You have this guy who was the squire of New York, who was going around with any number of beautiful women, did very well. And I mean, that was always the explanation why Truman fired MacArthur. In my judgment, was Revenge of the Nerds.
sure,
I believe that is a factor,
sure.
and because otherwise, it honestly, Chuck, it doesn't make any sense. Normally,
It's
you're going to have,
old-fashioned envy and
yeah,
jealousy.
yeah,
The guy down the street is getting more than I'm getting.
yeah,
I'm going to use my power because I have to stop it because I just can't stand the fact that it's happening.
yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
was bad enough that this guy is going around with all these chicks in New York, but now he became president and so on. You just can't have this.
Yeah. Yes,
So, when in doubt, I'm serious.
I believe in
Consider
it.
consider Revenge of the Nerds. Uh,
Revenge of the Nerds.
yeah,
Yes.
like well, that was the name of the movie, but look at Zuckerberg. He was interrogated
Yes.
by Congress. Uh, And
they didn't bring up the fact that I guess he's written another $420 million check, him and his wife, to grease a few palms, let's say, on the
yeah,
street, in preparation to kind of oil up the machine and get it ready to start cranking out votes. They didn't ask about that, you know.
well, I think in his case, he's been, I believe, being shamed into being an activist on the left. Um, I don't think the guy has a whole lot of talent. Uh, he was very fortunate. If you read how Facebook was founded, it's very questionable what he actually contributed to it.
Oh, I mean, he stole it from the Winklevoss brothers,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I
yeah.
I, I saw that. I mean, and they're
So,
bright. They're not stupid.
and there's people just with a lot of, as you say, envy that, I mean, Bill Clinton didn't represent the same thing. He came from a humble background. He never had a real job in his life. He did the FDR thing of marrying an ugly woman to take away from the fact that he's a playboy. He
Right.
copied that from Franklin Roosevelt, of
I'm
course.
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just envy. There's no grand play into this, other than it's very destructive. So, how's the sales of your book going?
It's moving along. I mean, I was interviewed by what's his name? I forget his name now. Oh, Ziv Brenner, Lifeline. He has a very big Jewish following,
Hmm,
and there was an uptake. He was unhappy with me by the end of the interview.
really?
Oh yeah, he did not like it. I mean, my daughter actually watched this and she noticed it too. He just did not like. Um, I don't know. Maybe this is Revenge of the Nerds. I don't know, but he just uh, he just was disgruntled by the end. He didn't say anything, but it was quite clear.
Well, what do you think bothered him about the content of the book?
There's some comment, something that I said maybe was a little. It didn't fit, the establishment view of what anti-Semitism is all about.
Hmm,
I don't know. I mean, there could be a lot of things. My book has some unconventional things in it. I definitely don't mince words about, like, for example, the ADL. I do a chapter on that, and I'm critical of them, and I did mention that. So it could have been a number of things, but I do have, I was interviewed yesterday by Michael Tessarian and David Whitehead from Unslaved. They've interviewed me in years past, and they've got a huge following. So we'll see. They're going to post that
yeah.
soon. And the whole trick of it is to get interviews and get the book out there. And so I'm working on it, and it's cooking along. It is what it is. I want to bring issues up publicly, and that's what I do. So
I was just thinking, would it be of any advantage for E. Michael Jones to interview you?
I don't think that we're not on speaking terms, and
Oh,
yeah, I mean, he's really, since the Hamas invasion, he's gone so. I mean, I have to get an extra dose of blood pressure medication if I'm going to talk to him. I just, yeah, I mean, he's become so twisted that I don't
that's
see
what
any.
happens to these guys, you
Yeah,
know.
and plus, I don't see any utility in it. I mean, he interviewed me for my last book, and it did nothing.
Right.
His followers aren't going to buy my book. I don't give, the hell with them.
Okay.
I don't see that as having any.
Well, he's pretty expert in anti-Semitism.
He
Yeah.
and he's quoted in my book, which he's unhappy about.
Hmm.
But I did so respectfully. But nevertheless, he's a public figure,
Right.
and I would think he'd thank me. But whatever. I mean,
Okay.
I'm approaching some of the people that have interviewed him. We'll see, because they know who I am. Because the interviews that he and I did together were huge, and they got a lot of traction. So we'll see what happens. Anyway,
Interesting. All
yes.
right.
So anyway, Mike, what do you have coming up on the
Well, we got a few things in the hopper. This was a busy week, as always. I thought I'd get it written yesterday, but life gets in the way while you're making
Yes,
other plans and all that,
indeed. All
because
right,
it's
Mike.
avocation, So
Well, that's
anyway,
why I'm doing most of my broadcasting on Thursdays, so I can
good
get them
idea.
all together and put aside one day a week that I can really do the show. So that's sort of my game plan.
I think
Anyways,
that's a good idea, because
yes,
otherwise, you you got every day where it's spread around like that, and
exactly. And I want to develop some consistency, and it helps, I think, with the show is moving along, so I think that helps.
excellent.
Anyhow, so I'll talk to you next week, and be well.
All right, we will